Hello, welcome back to Buckingham Palace. We're still here. No one's kicked us out yet. So let's now look at lighting this building. I'm going to turn the map off for this and I'm going to go back to visualize. Now you may notice looking at this that it doesn't quite look the same as it always has. There's a bit of a perspective going on here, and that's because we are in this perspective view. We switched to a camera at some point, and that's put us into a perspective view, which the camera does by default. And you can see the building is kind of elongating it, so it's giving us this depth perception that perspective view gives you. You see the walls are kind of narrowing as I move away, and you can change that. You can click on here on custom view, and you can have parallel or perspective. So parallel puts us back, that's how we were, so everything remains parallel, or perspective. So you can change that setting here. Generally for rendering and views, perspective looks better, but for actually working and modelling it can get a bit tiresome, so I like to work in parallel. So I want to talk now about lighting. Now let's go back to our camera view. So we can right click this camera, right click it and set camera view. Okay, I'm just going to pan out a bit. I want to just go into realistic. Now AutoCAD by default has a set of lighting that it loads up with. If there was no lighting at all in this drawing, it would just be black. You wouldn't see anything you've drawn, so it has to be lit somehow, and it does that by having a default set of lighting which kind of gives it a blanket light. There is some darker and lighter areas just to help highlight things, but it's only slight. It's kind of an all-round overhead lighting, which is fine for drawing in, but it doesn't look very realistic. And if you did actually want lights, if you had some spotlights here and you wanted them shining down, you wanted to see where the shadows would be, you could, or you wanted to actually, you may have some light units in here, you could actually create the lighting points on those lights and see how the building will be lit in real life. You can also see how the sun will light this building, where the shadowed areas will be, that kind of thing. As we start adding these lights, if we were to keep this default set of lighting on, we wouldn't see the true effect of these lights because it would be interfered with this default lighting. So fairly early on, when you start adding lights, AutoCAD will ask you if you want to turn the default lighting off, which you should do if you want to see how your lights will affect the view. If whilst you're beginning and you're getting used to it and you're experimenting, you get into a bit of trouble, suddenly everything's dark, you can't see anything because your lights are pointed the wrong way, you can always turn default lighting on. Okay, but it will, as we start adding lights on this drawing, it will ask us to turn it off. Now the first thing I want to do is turn the sky on. Again, AutoCAD knows whereabouts we are in the world. We can use this to tell it the date and the time. So if you know your location in the world, the date and the time, then you can work out where the sun is going to be. So let's turn on, we're going to turn on the sky, background and illumination. Okay, and now when you pan, you can see we have a vague horizon line here, and also we have a sun. coming from a certain place. Okay, and by changing the date and time, you can change the light. Okay, we can also turn on full shadows. And that is going to give us shadows on our building. Okay. Now these shadows aren't as apparent yet because we've got default light, and as I say, the default light shines pretty much everywhere. So what we want to do is we want to create a light. Okay. Now there's different types of light. We have distant light. Think of distant light a bit like sunlight. It's light coming from quite a long way away. It's going to be very wide kind of light that creates blanket shadows in one direction. Okay, but it's coming from a long way off, so it's all the shadows are going to be in the same kind of direction, like you would with sunlight. A spotlight is, as you think of a spotlight, it's shining usually down, but it doesn't have to be, and that's coming from a specific point in a specific direction. So that's going to highlight and throw shadows in a specific direction. A point light is a certain point that creates lights in all directions. So think of a spotlight as you would a lamp on your desk. It's throwing light in one direction only. A point light was imagine if you just had the bulb and didn't have the lampshade. It's a bulb that will throw light all over. If it was a perfect globe, it didn't have a light fitting on the bottom, it was just a globe of light, you would get light in all directions, whereas a spotlight is in a certain direction. But both these are local lights, so if you put them in a room, they would throw light from that point, from that spot. Distant is bringing light in from a long, think of it like light is coming from a direction, coming from the north or coming from the east, throughout the whole drawing. Okay, and then a web light. Web light gets a bit complicated. Generally, if you had a certain light, you knew the specifications of it. You can have files given to you by lighting manufacturers, which will have all the details of their output and the type of light it gives, and you can upload that and create a distinct light with all the manufacturer's settings, or with a light map. I would forget that for now, it gets very complicated. I would just use these three. These are all you need: distant light, spotlight and point light. Okay.